Ralph Donaldson speaking. How can I assist you today? The young man leaned back in his chair inside a cold, cluttered garage that served as his office. The space contained little more than a battered desk, a laptop, a small electric heater struggling against the chill, and a kettle perched on a shelf nearby. A hesitant voice answered through his headset. Oh, hello. My name is Magdalene. Magdalene Pendragon. I received an email claiming my bank account has been frozen. The caller sounded elderly, uncertain, and deeply worried. The young man smiled. This should be easy, he thought. Let me check that for you, Mrs. Pendragon. His fingers danced across the keyboard. Ah, yes. I can see the account. Unfortunately, it has been flagged due to suspicious activity. The good news is that your funds are still secure. Oh dear, the woman replied nervously. Please don't worry, he said in a reassuring tone he had perfected over hundreds of calls. We'll move your money into a protected account before any criminals can access it. I'll guide you through everything step by step. A relieved sigh came from the other end. Thank goodness. I was terribly frightened. There's nothing to worry about, Mrs. Pendragon. I just need to verify a few details. The young man was not Ralph Donaldson. His real name was Law Thomas. For over 2 years he had built a profitable career by targeting the elderly, the lonely, and the trusting. Every successful scam added another layer to the wall he had built around his conscience. At first, guilt had bothered him. Then the money started arriving. Soon, guilt became little more than a faint memory. What Law didn't know was that he had recently attracted the attention of a very unusual observer. An entity known by many names. One of those names was Nick. And Nick had been watching. The frail woman on the telephone was not who she claimed to be either. The voice belonged to Magdalene, Maggie to her friends, a young witch with a sharp mind and a mischievous smile. Sitting beside her was Robin, an ancient being whose harmless appearance concealed a terrifying reputation stretching back centuries. Together, they were conducting a final test. A test Law had already failed. The tragedy was that he never realized he was being judged. Law had left home 2 years earlier to study computer science at university. His parents had been proud when he received his acceptance letter. They were hard-working people who had always encouraged their only son to follow his passions. They never pressured him, never demanded perfection, and never expected more than his honest effort. Computers fascinated him. Programming came naturally. Building systems and solving technical problems felt almost effortless. Had circumstances been different, Law might have become an exceptional engineer. Instead, he discovered something else. Money. Easy money. A few online schemes became a side hustle. The side hustle became a habit. The habit became his life. Although he still attended lectures occasionally, his studies no longer mattered. Every hour spent learning felt wasted compared to the profits he could make deceiving strangers. Weekends were often spent visiting his parents. His mother would ask how university was going. His father would proudly tell neighbors about his brilliant son. Law would smile. And lie. Each lie came easier than the last. You're not evil, Law, the bearded stranger said calmly. But you've done some terrible things. Law frowned. What are you talking about? The scams. The stolen savings. The people you've hurt. A chill ran through him. How do you know about that? The man smiled faintly. I know more than you think. Law took a step back. Who are you? Police. The stranger considered the question. Let's call it something close enough. So you're here to punish me? No. The answer surprised him. I'm here to give you an opportunity. Time to understand the consequences of your choices. Law laughed nervously. That doesn't make any sense. Before he could say another word, a wave of dizziness washed over him. The world tilted. His vision darkened. Then everything disappeared. The next thing Law became aware of was a steady beeping sound. His body felt impossibly heavy. He tried to move. Nothing happened. A female voice spoke nearby. Mrs. Smedley? Can you hear me? Law attempted to answer but only managed a low, meaningless groan. That's good. Very good. Another voice joined the first. A doctor. You've been unconscious for some time following a severe stroke. We need to assess the extent of the damage. Law wanted to scream. I'm not Mrs. Smedley. But his mouth refused to cooperate. The sounds that emerged were little more than animal noises. Over the next hour the medical team examined him carefully. The results were grim. One eye had lost most of its vision. The left arm and leg were severely weakened. Speech had been heavily affected. Recovery would be possible, but slow. Painfully slow. Several days later, a therapist handed him a mirror. The reflection shattered what remained of his denial. Looking back at him was not a young university student. An elderly woman stared from the glass. Thin gray hair. Deep wrinkles. Sunken cheeks. Tired eyes. Law let out a broken cry. 4 days afterward he spoke to nobody. He refused therapy. Refused visitors. Refused hope. Unfortunately for him, the rehabilitation staff were stubborn. A cheerful physiotherapist named Amy and her assistant, Tam, ignored his complaints and forced him through endless exercises. Every day they stretched muscles. Every day they retrained movements. Every day they demanded effort. Slowly, painfully, progress began. At first he could barely sit upright. Later he could stand. Eventually he learned to shuffle short distances with a frame. The victories were tiny. Yet somehow they mattered. One evening a nurse helped him change into fresh nightwear. As she moved aside, Law caught sight of his body in a nearby mirror. The shock hit him all over again. Frailty. Age. Vulnerability. Everything he had once ignored in others now belonged to him. A tear rolled down his cheek. The nurse noticed. "You're recovering well, Muriel," she said gently. "Maybe not as quickly as you'd like, but you're getting stronger every day." She paused. "Tell you what. Once I've finished my rounds, I'll come back and do your nails." Law almost protested. Then a strange image appeared inside his mind. A memory. A little girl sitting patiently while a smiling woman painted her fingernails bright red. The memory felt real. Too real. The smell of polish. The warmth of the room. The laughter. None of it belonged to him. Yet somehow it did. When the nurse returned later that evening, he didn't resist. She carefully filed and painted his nails. When she finished, Law studied the wrinkled hand resting in his lap. The nails looked surprisingly elegant. After several attempts he forced out 2 difficult words. "Thank you." The nurse's face lit up. "You're very welcome, Muriel." The months passed. Recovery continued. Something else changed as well. Law's memories began to blur. The details of his old life grew less certain. Names faded. Places became difficult to recall. At the same time, Muriel's memories became stronger. Birthdays. School friends. First loves. Family holidays. Moments of joy and heartbreak. An entire lifetime slowly unfolded inside his mind. He fought against it. At first. Eventually he stopped fighting. Visitors began arriving. People who should have been strangers. Yet somehow felt familiar. Old neighbors. Former colleagues. Lifelong friends. One visitor in particular changed everything. A woman named Pat. The moment she entered the room, emotion filled her eyes. "Muriel." Muriel studied her face carefully. Then recognition surfaced. "Pat." Pat burst into tears and embraced her. The 2 women spent hours reminiscing. Teenage adventures. Embarrassing mistakes. Long-forgotten romances. Stories buried beneath decades of life. As they talked, memories rose naturally within Muriel's mind. Not Law's memories. Muriel's. And for the first time, they felt completely real. Months later Muriel returned home. The house felt both familiar and unfamiliar. Every room carried traces of a life she now remembered living. Handrails had been installed. Doorways modified. The house had been prepared for someone recovering from a stroke. When the support worker finally left, silence settled over everything. Muriel hated it. She switched on the radio immediately. The familiar voices filled the emptiness. Later, while sorting through letters at the kitchen table, she discovered one from the bank. Her appeal had failed. The money stolen by scammers would not be reimbursed. She sat silently staring at the letter. For the first time she truly understood. The fear. The helplessness. The humiliation. This was what her victims had felt. The realization struck harder than any punishment could have. Instead of giving up, Muriel sought help. Advice services guided her through the appeals process. Months later, the bank agreed to a settlement. The victory was modest but meaningful. More importantly, it restored something she thought she'd lost: hope. One morning at the local community center, another elderly woman approached her looking distressed. "I've received this email about an unpaid television license," the woman said. "It says I owe hundreds of pounds." Muriel examined the message. The warning signs were obvious. A scam. Exactly the kind she once would have created herself. She calmly explained the deception and helped report it. The woman's relief was immediate. "Oh, thank you, Muriel. You've saved me from making a terrible mistake." Muriel smiled. For the first time in a very long time, helping someone felt better than taking advantage of them. The next morning she woke feeling lighter. And for the first time since waking in Muriel Smedley's body, she smiled before she even got out of bed. The morning sunlight filtered through the curtains as she stretched carefully, mindful of the stiffness that still lingered from her stroke. Using the support rail beside the bed, she eased herself upright and shuffled into her slippers before making her way to the bathroom. Back in her bedroom, she selected fresh clothes from the dresser. The woman staring back at her from the mirror no longer seemed like a stranger. There had been a time when memories of another life haunted her, fragmented images of youth, ambition, and mistakes. Those memories had faded over the years, replaced by experiences that felt far more meaningful. After dressing, she paused before her wardrobe. The sensible outfit she'd planned the night before suddenly seemed uninspiring. "No," she murmured. "It's far too lovely a day for that." A floral summer dress soon replaced it. By the time she stepped outside an hour later, she was smiling. Helping people had become second nature. At the community center, neighbors frequently sought her advice. One gentleman wanted help setting up video calls with family overseas. Another needed assistance ordering groceries online. What had once been skills used selfishly were now used to make life easier for others. And every time she solved a problem, she felt a quiet sense of satisfaction. As the months passed, Muriel found herself spending more time outdoors. She developed a fondness for photography, capturing autumn leaves, squirrels, and birds in the local park. The world seemed richer now. More colorful. More precious. She often wondered why she had never noticed such things before. One crisp afternoon, Muriel sat outside a small cafe after a long walk. Her foot ached, so she removed one shoe and gently massaged it. A shadow fell across the table. "May I join you?" a calm voice asked. Muriel looked up. The young woman standing there had striking red hair and unusually bright eyes. "Of course." The stranger introduced herself as Robin. A few moments later, another young woman arrived carrying 3 cups of ice cream. "You're Muriel," she said warmly. "I've heard a lot about you." Muriel's heart skipped. Something about the girl's smile seemed strangely familiar. The conversation that followed felt dreamlike. By the time it ended, Muriel's aching feet no longer hurt. The stiffness in her legs seemed reduced. Even her thoughts felt clearer. When she finally returned home, the details of the encounter had already begun slipping away like a half-forgotten dream. Yet the improvements remained. The following years brought unexpected happiness. Muriel continued volunteering. She made new friends. She rediscovered old interests. Most surprisingly of all, she found companionship. Roland entered her life quietly. They met through local dances and community events. At first they were simply friends. Then inseparable friends. Together they explored seaside towns, attended dances, visited historic estates, and shared countless cups of tea. The relationship never resembled youthful romance. It was something gentler. Something deeper. A partnership built on kindness and understanding. When Roland eventually passed away following a sudden heart attack, Muriel grieved deeply. Yet she carried his memory with gratitude rather than despair. He had brought joy into a chapter of life she once thought would be lonely. Nearly 4 years after awakening in Muriel's body, winter arrived once again. One snowy afternoon she sat in the park listening to a brass band perform Christmas carols. As flakes drifted lazily through the air, a familiar figure appeared beside her. A stout bearded man. Nick. The world seemed to grow strangely still. The music faded. Even the falling snow appeared suspended. Muriel turned toward him. "I wondered if I'd ever see you again." Nick smiled. I've been watching. For a while they sat together in silence. Finally he asked the question she had always known would come. Have you learned anything? Muriel considered her answer carefully. Years earlier she might have spoken about punishment, regret, or consequences. Instead she thought about friendships. About Pat. About Roland. About helping frightened strangers. About kindness. About belonging. I think I've learned what I was missing, she said softly. Nick nodded. And what was that? People. The old man smiled. That's a very good answer. Muriel looked out across the snow-covered park. For the first time she understood something important. The greatest gift she had received was not a second chance. It was the chance to truly connect with others. And that had changed everything.